We know that many of you come to these essays not just to sleep, but because during the day, your mind is too full, too noisy. That's why we create these pieces deep enough for you to feel nourished, yet gentle enough for you to let go. Imagine standing at the edge of a sleeping forest just before dawn. Mist clings to the earth like forgotten dreams. The air tastes of pine and damp soil. Your breath makes small clouds into cold. Somewhere distant, an owl gives its final call before surrendering the night. You are the only witness to this transition, this liminal moment between darkness and light. In this threshold space, something stirs beneath the surface of ordinary awareness. It is neither fully visible nor completely hidden. This is the realm that fascinated Carl Gustav Jung throughout his extraordinary life. The vast unconscious depths that shape our thoughts, dreams, and destinies in ways our rational minds can scarcely comprehend. This feeling of standing between worlds embodies the essence of what Jung dedicated his life to understanding. At once, familiar and mysterious, comforting and unsettling. The unconscious resembles a threshold between the known self we present to the world and the hidden self that dreams creates and whispers truths we are not always ready to hear. In our modern world of constant connectivity and relentless productivity, we have become strangers to our own depths. We scroll through endless feeds, respond to countless notifications, and fill every silence with noise. Yet beneath this frenetic surface, something ancient and essential calls to us. Jung recognized this call over a century ago, and his insights remain urgently relevant today as we seek meaning in an age of distraction. This exploration of psychology for sleep offers something different from the usual bedtime content. We will journey through the complete architecture of Jungian psychology, from its foundational concepts to its most challenging applications. Throughout history, the unconscious mind has fascinated philosophers, mystics, and scientists. We will explore how this hidden dimension appears across human cultures, how modern research validates ancient wisdom, and what it means for your own journey toward psychological wholeness. From ancient Greek philosophers to medieval alchemists to contemporary neuroscientists, humanity has always sensed that consciousness is merely the tip of an immense iceberg. Jung gave us the map to navigate these depths. Tonight, as you settle into rest, allow these ideas to work on you the way dreams work, gently, persistently transforming you from within, while your conscious mind releases its grip on the day. Let the journey begin. Carl Gustav Jung transformed psychology by revealing the hidden depths of the human mind. Born in 1875 in a small Swiss village, Jung grew up surrounded by mystery and supernatural experiences that shaped his lifelong fascination with the invisible forces governing human behavior. Initially trained as a psychiatrist, Jung worked closely with Sigmund Freud and became his chosen successor. However, Jung's revolutionary insights about the unconscious mind eventually led to a dramatic break with his mentor in 1913. While Freud viewed the unconscious primarily as a repository for repressed sexual desires and traumatic memories, Jung discovered something far more profound and complex. Jung recognized that the unconscious operates as a living, dynamic system that actively participates in shaping our conscious experience. He observed that patients often described dreams, fantasies, and symbols that had no connection to their personal histories, yet appeared universally across different cultures and time periods. This psychology for sleep content allows these observations to settle into your awareness without effort. This observation led Jung to propose a revolutionary two-layer model of the unconscious mind. The first layer, which Jung termed the personal unconscious, contains all the material that has slipped out of consciousness during an individual's lifetime. This includes forgotten childhood memories, repressed emotions, unfinished thoughts, and experiences too painful or insignificant for conscious awareness. The personal unconscious acts like a vast library where everything we have ever experienced gets stored. Even if we cannot consciously access these memories, these forgotten contents continue to influence our behavior through sudden emotional reactions, inexplicable preferences, and automatic responses to certain situations. The second layer represents Jung's most groundbreaking discovery, the collective unconscious. This deeper realm contains universal patterns of human experience that transcend individual biography and cultural conditioning. Jung realized that certain images, themes, and behavioral patterns appear consistently across all human societies, suggesting they emerge from our shared evolutionary heritage rather than personal learning. These universal elements, which Jung called archetypes, include fundamental human experiences like birth, death, the mother figure, the wise old man, and the hero's journey. The collective unconscious explains why people from completely different backgrounds often share similar dreams, create comparable myths, and respond to certain symbols in predictable ways. For example, the image of a great mother figure appears in virtually every culture, from the Christian Virgin Mary to Hindu goddesses to ancient Earth Mother deities. These archetypal patterns emerge spontaneously in dreams, art literature, and religious experiences because they represent fundamental structures of human consciousness itself. Jung believed that understanding these universal patterns could help individuals connect with the deeper wisdom of humanity and find meaning in their personal struggles. Jung discovered that the unconscious communicates with consciousness through a sophisticated, symbolic language. Dreams, fantasies, sudden insights, and even psychological symptoms serve as messages from the unconscious, attempting to restore balance and promote psychological growth. Unlike Freud, who saw dreams primarily as wish fulfillment, Jung viewed them as compensatory mechanisms that provide missing perspectives and guide the conscious mind toward greater wholeness. The unconscious possesses its own intelligence and often knows solutions to problems that baffle our rational thinking. This understanding makes psychology for sleep not just restful, but genuinely transformative. Jung revolutionized psychology by treating the mind as an energy system governed by natural laws similar to those found in physics. He believed that psychological energy, which he called libido, flows throughout the psyche like electricity through a circuit. Unlike Freud, who viewed libido exclusively as sexual energy, Jung understood it as a general life force that manifests in all human activities, including creativity, spiritual pursuits, intellectual work, and emotional connections. This energy constantly moves between different psychological contents, create into dynamic patterns we observe in human behavior. Jung discovered that psychic energy operates according to a fundamental principle he called compensation. When conscious attitudes become too one-sided or extreme, the unconscious automatically generates opposing tendencies to restore psychological balance. For example, if someone becomes overly rational and dismisses all emotional considerations, their unconscious will produce dreams, fantasies, or symptoms that force them to confront their neglected feeling side. This compensatory mechanism ensures that no single psychological function dominates, completely preventing dangerous psychological imbalances. The flow of psychic energy creates what Jung termed psychological complexes, clusters of emotionally charged ideas that operate somewhat independently within the psyche. These complexes can temporarily capture large amounts of psychological energy, causing sudden mood changes, obsessive thoughts, or compulsive behaviors. Jung observed that when energy becomes stuck in a complex, it often signals an important psychological issue that requires conscious attention and integration. Understanding energy flow helps explain why certain experiences trigger disproportionate emotional reactions, or why some people become fixated on particular ideas or relationships. Jung noticed that psychic energy naturally moves in cycles alternating between periods of progression and regression. During progressive phases, energy flows toward conscious goals and external adaptation, helping individuals accomplish worldly tasks and develop their ego identity. During regressive phases, energy withdraws from external concerns and flows back toward unconscious contents, often bringing up childhood memories, primitive fantasies, or archetypal images. Rather than viewing regression as pathological, Jung recognized it as a necessary process that allows the psyche to reconnect with its deeper sources of wisdom and creativity. The concept of psychological energy also explains the phenomenon of psychological inflation, where individuals become identified with powerful archetypal contents and lose their sense of personal boundaries. When someone unconsciously identifies with an archetype, like the wise sage or the heroic savior, they may experience grandiose feelings and believe they possess superhuman abilities. This inflation occurs because archetypal energy is collective rather than personal, and when it flows through an individual ego, it can create dangerous delusions of grandeur. Jung emphasized that recognizing and respecting the autonomous nature of archetypal energy helps prevent such psychological inflation and maintains healthy ego boundaries. Jung's theory of psychological types emerged from his careful observation of fundamental differences in how people perceive and interact with the world. After years of clinical work and personal reflection, Jung identified two basic attitude types that determine whether individuals primarily focus their energy inward or outward. He called these fundamental orientations extroversion and introversion terms that have since become part of everyday language, but are often misunderstood in their original psychological meaning. Jung emphasized that these are not personality categories, but rather descriptions of how psychic energy naturally flows in different individuals. Extroversion involves directing psychological energy toward the external world of people, objects, and activities. Extroverted individuals tend to be energized by social interaction, seek stimulation from their environment, and naturally focus on external circumstances when making decisions. They typically think out loud, process experiences by discussing them with others, and feel comfortable acting quickly without extensive internal reflection. Extroverted types often appear confident and socially skilled, but they may struggle with prolonged solitude and tend to avoid deep introspection. Introversion involves focusing psychological energy inward toward thoughts, feelings, and inner experiences. Introverted individuals tend to be energized by solitude, prefer to process experiences internally before sharing them, and naturally consider their inner reactions when making decisions. They typically think before speaking, need time alone to recharge after social interaction, and feel comfortable with extended periods of reflection and contemplation. Introverted types often appear thoughtful and self-contained, but they may struggle with spontaneous social interaction and tend to avoid large group situations. Jung discovered that these attitude types are largely innate and remain relatively stable throughout life, though individuals can develop their less preferred attitude through conscious effort. He observed that most people strongly favor one attitude, while the other remains less developed and largely unconscious. This creates an interesting dynamic where the unconscious often compensates for conscious one-sidedness by producing dreams, fantasies, or attractions that pull individuals toward their less developed attitude. Understanding these natural preferences helps explain many interpersonal conflicts and misunderstandings that arise when extroverted and introverted types attempt to communicate or work together. Jung also noticed that within each attitude type, individuals show marked preferences for how they gather information and make decisions. Some people naturally trust their direct sensory experience and focus on concrete facts and practical details, while others prefer to focus on possibilities, patterns, and abstract concepts. Similarly, some individuals make decisions primarily through logical analysis and objective criteria, while others prioritize personal values and the impact of decisions on human relationships. These different ways of processing information and making decisions create additional layers of psychological type differences that profoundly influence how people approach work relationships and life challenges. This foundation in psychology for sleep gently reveals patterns you may recognize in yourself and others. Jung identified 4 fundamental psychological functions that represent different ways the human mind processes information and makes decisions. These functions operate like specialized tools in the psyche, each providing a unique perspective on reality and contributing to our overall understanding of the world. Jung discovered that while everyone possesses all 4 functions, individuals typically develop 1 or 2 functions more fully, while the others remain relatively unconscious and undifferentiated. This uneven development creates both strengths and blind spots that significantly influence personality, career choices, and relationship dynamics. The think and function processes information through logical analysis, objective reasoning, and systematic evaluation of cause and effect relationships. Individuals who strongly favor thinking tend to make decisions by analyzing facts, weighing pros and cons, and applying consistent principles regardless of personal feelings or social considerations. They excel at problem solving, strategic planning, and understanding complex systems, but may struggle to consider the human impact of their decisions or appreciate the value of emotions in decision making. Thinking types often appear detached and impersonal, but this objectivity allows them to maintain fairness and consistency, even in emotionally charged situations. The feeling function evaluates information based on personal values, human considerations, and the subjective worth of different options. Individuals who favor feeling make decisions by considering what matters most to them personally and how their choices will affect other people. They excel at understanding human motivations, creating harmony in relationships, and recognizing the underlying values that guide behavior, but may struggle with impersonal analysis or making difficult decisions that hurt others. Feeling types often appear warm and empathetic, and their value-based approach helps them create meaningful connections and maintain group cohesion. The sensation function focuses on immediate sensory experience, concrete facts, and practical realities of the present moment. Individuals who favor sensation tend to trust what they can see, hear, touch, and directly experience rather than abstract theories or future possibilities. They excel at noticing details, working with their hands, and dealing with practical problems that require attention to immediate circumstances, but may struggle with long-term planning or understanding theoretical concepts. Sensation types often appear grounded and realistic, and their practical focus helps them excel in fields requiring attention to concrete details and immediate results. The intuition function perceives patterns, possibilities, and hidden meanings that exist beyond immediate sensory experience. Individuals who favor intuition tend to focus on future potential underlying connections and innovative possibilities, rather than present realities. They excel at seeing the big picture, generating creative solutions, and understanding complex theoretical relationships, but may struggle with practical details or following through on routine tasks. Intuitive types often appear visionary and imaginative, and their ability to perceive hidden possibilities helps them excel in fields requiring innovation and strategic thinking. Jung discovered that these four functions operate in partnership, thinking and feeling, forming one pair of opposites, and sensation and intuition forming another pair. He also identified a crucial mechanism called the transcendent function, which helps integrate opposing psychological contents and create new conscious attitudes. The transcendent function emerges when conscious and unconscious elements unite to produce creative solutions that transcend the limitations of either perspective alone. Understanding and developing this integrative capacity becomes essential for psychological growth and the resolution of internal conflicts. As this psychology for sleep continues to unfold, notice how these concepts begin to illuminate your own experience. Jung's discovery of psychological complexes represents one of his most important contributions to understand that mental functioning. Through his innovative word association experiments, Jung found that certain words triggered delayed responses, emotional reactions, and memory lapses that revealed the presence of autonomous psychological structures operating outside conscious control. These complexes function like independent personalities within the psyche, each possessing their own emotions, memories, and behavioral patterns that can temporarily take control of consciousness. Jung realized that everyone possesses multiple complexes, and understanding their nature becomes crucial for psychological health and personal development. A complex forms when a cluster of emotionally charged ideas, memories, and associations becomes organized around a central archetypal core. For example, a mother complex might include personal memories of one's actual mother, cultural images of motherhood, and the archetypal pattern of the great mother that exists in the collective unconscious. When activated, this complex can cause an individual to react to certain people or situations as if they were encountering their mother regardless of the actual circumstances. The complex operates autonomously, meaning it has its own agenda, and can override rational thinking when triggered by specific situations or relationships. Jung observed that complexes often develop during childhood, when powerful emotional experiences combine with archetypal patterns to create lasting psychological structures. A child who experiences neglect or abandonment might develop a complex organized around themes of rejection and unworthiness that continues to influence relationships throughout adult life. These early complexes become like psychological magnets that attract similar experiences and interpret ambiguous situations according to their established patterns. Understanding personal complexes helps explain why certain relationships or situations trigger disproportionate emotional reactions, or why people repeatedly find themselves in similar problematic circumstances. Complexes reveal themselves through various psychological phenomena, including projection, where individuals unconsciously attribute their own complex contents to other people. Someone with an unresolved father complex might automatically view authority figures as either idealized saviors or threatening tyrants, depending on the specific nature of their complex. Complexes also manifest through psychological inflation, where individuals become identified with archetypal contents and lose their sense of personal boundaries and limitations. A person inflated with a savior complex might believe they have special powers to rescue others and become grandiose or messianic in their behavior. Working with complexes requires developing what Jung called conscious realization, the ability to recognize when a complex has been activated and distinguish between complex-driven reactions and appropriate responses to actual circumstances. Jung developed specific therapeutic techniques, including active imagination and dream analysis, to help individuals dialogue with their complexes and integrate their contents more consciously. Rather than trying to eliminate complexes, which Jung considered impossible and undesirable, the goal involves developing a healthy relationship with these autonomous psychological structures. When complexes are acknowledged and integrated, they can become sources of creativity, passion, and psychological energy, rather than disruptive forces that create suffering and interpersonal conflict. Jung considered individuation the central task of human psychological development and the ultimate goal of his analytical psychology. This process involves the gradual realization and integration of the various components of the psyche into a unified whole, leading to the emergence of the true self. Unlike simple ego development, which focuses on adapting to external demands and social expectations, individuation requires confronting and integrating unconscious contents that may challenge or contradict conscious beliefs and attitudes. Jung viewed this as a natural process that unfolds throughout life, but one that requires conscious participation and courage to face difficult psychological truths. The individuation process typically begins in midlife when individuals start questioning the values and goals that previously gave their lives meaning. Jung observed that many people experience a psychological crisis during their 30s or 40s when external achievements fail to provide lasting satisfaction and deeper questions about life's purpose begin to emerge. This crisis often manifests as depression, anxiety, relationship problems, or a general sense of emptiness despite outward success. Jung understood these symptoms as signals from the unconscious that the time has come to embark on a deeper journey towards psychological wholeness and authentic self-expression. The early stages of individuation involve withdrawing psychological projections and taking responsibility for disowned aspects of personality. Individuals must recognize and reclaim parts of themselves that they have unconsciously projected onto other people, institutions, or ideals. This includes confronting the shadow, those aspects of personality that contradict the conscious self-image and have been relegated to the unconscious. The process also requires integrating the contrasexual aspects of personality, what Jung called the anima in men and animus in women, which represent the undeveloped psychological functions and attitudes that complement conscious personality. As individuation progresses, individuals begin to experience a shift in their relationship to the ego and its goals. The ego, which previously functioned as the center of personality, gradually learns to serve the deeper self that emerges from the integration of conscious and unconscious contents. This transition often involves periods of uncertainty and disorientation as old identity structures dissolve and new ones have not yet fully formed. Jung compared this phase to the alchemical process of dissolution and renewal, where the old personality must die before a more authentic self can be born. The ultimate goal of individuation is not perfection, but wholeness, which includes acceptance of human limitations, contradictions, and the inevitable presence of suffering in life. Individuated individuals develop what Jung called a religious attitude toward life, meaning they experience a sense of connection to something greater than their personal ego concerns. They become capable of holding paradox and tension without rushing to eliminate discomfort, and they develop a deep appreciation for the mystery and complexity of human existence. Jung emphasized that individuation is never complete, but represents an ongoing process of growth and self-discovery that continues throughout life. This understanding of psychology for sleep offers not escape, but gentle guidance toward your own becoming. The self represents Jung's most profound discovery about the deepest structure of human personality and the ultimate goal of psychological development. Unlike the ego, which serves as the center of conscious awareness, the self encompasses the totality of both conscious and unconscious psychic contents, functioning as the organizing principle of the entire personality. Jung described the self as both the goal of individuation and the guiding force that orchestrates the psychological development process from behind the scenes. This archetype emerges gradually throughout life as individuals integrate various aspects of their personality and develop a more complete understanding of their true nature. The self archetype manifests in consciousness through powerful symbols that convey a sense of wholeness, completion, and transcendence. These symbols include geometric forms like circles, squares, and mandalas, as well as images of divine figures, wise old men or women, and mythological beings that represent ultimate authority and wisdom. Jung noticed that individuals undergoing psychological transformation often spontaneously draw circular patterns or feel drawn to religious and spiritual imagery that depicts unity and transcendence. These self symbols appear in dreams' active imagination and artistic expressions as the psyche attempts to represent its deepest organizing principle in symbolic form. The relationship between ego and self undergoes a fundamental transformation during the individuation process. In the first half of life, the ego typically functions as if it were the center of personality, making decisions based on personal desires, social expectations, and rational calculations. However, as individuation progresses, the ego gradually learns to recognize and serve the deeper wisdom of the self, which possesses a broader perspective on life's meaning and purpose. This shift requires the ego to surrender its illusion of total control and develop what Jung called a religious attitude that acknowledges the presence of forces greater than conscious will. Jung observed that the self often communicates with consciousness through synchronistic experiences, meaningful coincidences that suggest an underlying order and intelligence operating beyond personal control. Individuals may notice that important life events seem to unfold according to a pattern that becomes apparent only in retrospect, as if guided by an invisible hand. The self also manifests through what Jung called the transcendent function, which creates new conscious attitudes by bridging opposing psychological contents and generating creative solutions to internal conflicts. These experiences provide evidence that something beyond the ego is organizing psychological development and guiding individuals toward their unique path of self-realization. The emergence of the self as a living reality in consciousness represents the culmination of the individuation process and the development of genuine psychological maturity. Individuals who have developed a conscious relationship with the self typically display a quality of centered presence and inner authority that does not depend on external validation or achievement. They become capable of making difficult decisions based on inner conviction rather than social pressure, and they develop the capacity to hold paradox and uncertainty without losing their psychological equilibrium. Jung emphasized that realizing the self does not eliminate human problems, but provides a stable foundation for navigating life's challenges with wisdom, compassion, and authentic self-expression. The shadow represents one of Jung's most psychologically challenging and socially relevant discoveries about human nature. This archetype encompasses all the aspects of personality that individuals find unacceptable and therefore relegate to the unconscious, creating a hidden counterpart to the conscious persona. The shadow contains not only negative qualities like aggression, selfishness, and crude impulses, but also positive potentials that contradict social expectations or threaten the conscious self-image. Jung emphasized that everyone possesses a shadow, and that psychological health requires acknowledging and integrating these disowned aspects, rather than pretending they do not exist. Shadow formation begins early in childhood, When social conditioning teaches individuals which aspects of their natural personality are acceptable and which must be hidden or suppressed, parents, teachers, and peer groups communicate explicit and implicit messages about appropriate behavior, causing children to develop a persona that conforms to social expectations while pushing unacceptable impulses into the unconscious. This process is necessary for social functioning, but creates an internal split that can become problematic if the shadow remains completely unconscious and unintegrated. Cultural and family values heavily influence which specific qualities end up in the shadow, explaining why shadow contents vary significantly between individuals and social groups. The shadow typically reveals itself through psychological projection, where individuals unconsciously attribute their own disowned qualities to other people. Someone who has repressed their aggressive impulses might become hypersensitive to aggression in others and react with disproportionate moral outrage to relatively minor displays of assertiveness. Shadow projection also explains many forms of prejudice and social conflict. As groups project their collective shadow onto other ethnicities, religions, or political movements, Jung observed that the qualities we most strongly condemn in others often represent aspects of our own shadow that we refuse to acknowledge or integrate consciously. Dreams frequently provide the first glimpse of shadow contents through disturbing images of dark figures, criminals, animals, or same-sex characters who embody qualities the dreamer finds reprehensible. These shadow figures often pursue attack or threaten the dream ego, representing the unconscious pressure to acknowledge and integrate disowned aspects of personality. Jung encouraged individuals to dialogue with these dream figures, rather than simply fighting or fleeing from them, as they contain valuable energy and capabilities that can enhance conscious personality when properly integrated. Active imagination techniques can help establish ongoing communication with shadow figures and gradually transform them from threatening adversaries into powerful allies. Integrating the shadow requires tremendous courage and honesty because it means acknowledging aspects of oneself that contradict cherished self-concepts and moral ideals. However, Jung discovered that shadow integration actually strengthens rather than corrupts conscious personality by providing access to previously unavailable energy, creativity, and authentic self-expression. Individuals who have integrated significant shadow contents become more spontaneous, passionate, and psychologically robust, while also developing genuine humility and compassion for human weakness. Jung warned that attempting to eliminate the shadow entirely leads to psychological inflation and dangerous unconscious possession, while conscious integration allows individuals to channel shadow energy constructively without being overwhelmed by it. This deep psychology for sleep works on you even as you rest, inviting shadow recognition without overwhelming your defenses. Jung discovered that every individual possesses an unconscious contrasexual aspect that compensates for the conscious gender identity and serves as a bridge between conscious and unconscious realms. In men, this unconscious feminine aspect is called the anima, while in women, the unconscious masculine aspect is termed the animus. These archetypal figures represent much more than simple gender stereotypes. They embody the undeveloped psychological functions, emotional capacities, and spiritual possibilities that complement the conscious personality. Understanding and integrating the contrasexual archetype becomes essential for psychological completeness and the development of mature relationships with both oneself and others. The anima in men typically manifests as emotional, intuitive, and relational qualities that have been underdeveloped due to masculine socialization, emphasizing logic achievement and emotional control. She often appears in dreams as a mysterious woman, seductress, or spiritual guide who leads the man toward greater emotional depth and connection with his inner life. When the anima remains unconscious, men may project her onto actual women, seeking in romantic relationships the emotional fulfillment and spiritual meaning they cannot provide for themselves. This projection creates unrealistic expectations and relationship difficulties, as no real woman can carry the full weight of a man's unlived psychological potential. The animus in women represents thinking, assertiveness, and spiritual authority that may have been suppressed by feminine socialization, emphasizing emotional receptivity and relational harmony. He often appears in dreams as a powerful man teacher or warrior who embodies conviction, intellectual strength, and the capacity for independent action. When the animus remains unconscious, women may become possessed by rigid opinions, aggressive argumentativeness, or an inability to think clearly about emotional situations. Alternatively, women may project the animus onto men seeking in relationships the intellectual stimulation and spiritual authority they have not developed within themselves. Jung observed that contrasexual projection creates a psychological phenomenon he called participation mystique, where individuals become unconsciously merged with others and lose their sense of individual boundaries. When someone projects their anima or animus onto another person, they may experience intense attraction, idealization, or emotional dependency that has little to do with the actual qualities of the other person. These projections often lead to dramatic relationship conflicts when the idealized other fails to live up to unrealistic expectations, or when the projector begins to withdraw their projections and see the other person more realistically. Understanding projection dynamics helps explain why romantic relationships often begin with intense passion and gradually develop into more realistic but potentially disappointing connections. The integration of anima and animus requires developing a conscious relationship with these inner figures through dream work, active imagination, and the gradual withdrawal of projections from external relationships. As men develop their anima, they become more emotionally available, creative, and spiritually sensitive without losing their masculine strength and direction. As women integrate their animus, they develop intellectual confidence, assertive capabilities, and spiritual authority while maintaining their feminine receptivity and relational wisdom. Jung emphasized that this integration does not eliminate gender differences, but creates more complete individuals who can access both masculine and feminine psychological capacities as appropriate to different life situations. The persona represents the mask or public face that individuals present to the world in order to function effectively in social and professional contexts. Jung derived this term from the masks worn by actors in ancient Greek theater, emphasizing that the persona serves a legitimate dramatic function rather than being simply a form of deception or false advertising. Every individual develops multiple personas appropriate to different social roles, such as parent, employee, friend, or community member, and the ability to adapt one's presentation to various contexts represents an important social skill. However, problems arise when individuals become overly identified with their personas, or when the gap between public presentation and private reality becomes too extreme. Persona development begins in childhood as individuals learn to modify their natural behavior to meet family and social expectations. Children quickly discover that certain aspects of their personality receive positive attention, while others provoke criticism or rejection, leading them to emphasize socially rewarded qualities and hide those deemed unacceptable. Educational and professional environments further shape persona development by rewarding specific skills, attitudes, and behavioral patterns while discouraging others. Over time, individuals may become so skilled at presenting their idealized self that they lose touch with their authentic feelings, desires, and spontaneous reactions. Jung observed that successful persona development requires finding an appropriate balance between social adaptation and authentic self expression. A well functioning persona allows individuals to meet legitimate social obligations and professional requirements without completely sacrificing their individuality and personal truth. However, when the persona becomes too rigid or elaborate, it can create a psychological prison that prevents genuine intimacy and self knowledge. People may become exhausted from constantly maintaining their public image, or feel increasingly disconnected from their true feelings and desires as they focus primarily on external validation and approval. The midlife crisis often involves a collapse or questioning of previously successful personas, as individuals begin to realize that their public achievements have not provided the deep satisfaction they expected. Successful professionals may suddenly feel empty despite external recognition, or devoted parents may experience an identity crisis when their children become independent and no longer need constant care. These persona crises, while painful, often serve as invitations to explore more authentic ways of being and to develop aspects of personality that have been neglected in favor of social success. Jung viewed such crises as opportunities for psychological growth rather than simply problems to be solved or symptoms to be eliminated. Healthy persona development involves maintaining conscious awareness of the difference between one's social roles and one's core identity. Individuals need to be able to put on and take off their various personas as appropriate without becoming completely identified with any single role or social identity. This requires developing what Jung called ego strength, the capacity to maintain a sense of personal continuity and authenticity despite changing external demands and social expectations. When the persona serves the authentic self rather than replacing it, individuals can engage effectively with the social world while remaining connected to their deeper sources of meaning and personal truth. The parental archetypes represent fundamental patterns of nurturing and authority that shape human development from birth through adulthood. Jung discovered that every individual carries within their unconscious both a great mother and great father image that transcends their personal experience with actual parents. These archetypal patterns influence how people understand caregiving protection, discipline, and guidance throughout their lives, affecting not only parent child relationships, but also connections with teachers, mentors, employers, and religious figures. Understanding parental archetypes helps explain why certain authority figures trigger such powerful emotional reactions, and why parenting challenges often activate deep, unconscious conflicts. The Great Mother archetype encompasses both positive and negative aspects of the maternal principle. In her positive manifestation, she represents unconditional love, nurturing protection, fertile creativity, and the wisdom that comes from deep connection to natural cycles and instinctive knowledge. The positive mother provides emotional security, encourages growth and exploration, and offers comfort during times of difficulty and transition. However, the Great Mother also has a darker side that can become possessive, smothering, and destructive, representing the tendency to overprotect children and prevent their natural development toward independence and maturity. The Great Father archetype embodies both the protective and the disciplinary aspects of paternal authority. In his positive form, he represents strength, guidance, moral principles, and the capacity to provide structure and direction that helps children develop confidence and competence in the outer world. The positive father encourages achievement, teaches practical skills, and models how to engage effectively with social institutions and cultural expectations. The negative father archetype manifests as tyrannical control, harsh criticism, and rigid authoritarianism that crushes individual creativity and forces conformity through fear and punishment rather than love and understanding. Jung observed that individuals often develop what he called parental complexes when their personal parents fail to adequately embody the positive aspects of these archetypes, or when they become too identified with the negative manifestations. A mother complex might cause someone to remain psychologically dependent and unable to take responsibility for their own life, constantly seeking maternal figures to provide care and protection. A father complex might manifest as either rebellious opposition to all authority or submissive compliance that prevents the development of personal strength and independent judgment. These complexes continue to influence adult relationships, career choices, and life decisions until they are recognized and consciously addressed through psychological work. The integration of parental archetypes requires developing what Jung called the inner parent, the capacity to provide for oneself, the nurturing and guidance that may have been lacking in childhood. This involves learning to access the positive qualities of both maternal and paternal archetypes, regardless of one's biological gender, creating an internal source of support and wisdom that does not depend on external relationships. As individuals develop their inner parental capacity, they become able to offer authentic care and guidance to others without becoming possessive or controlling, and they can receive help and mentorship without losing their sense of personal autonomy. This psychological maturation allows people to break destructive family patterns and create healthier relationships with their own children and the younger people in their lives. Through this psychology for sleep, ancestral patterns gently reveal themselves for healing. The hero archetype represents one of humanity's most powerful and universal patterns for understanding personal transformation and the journey toward psychological maturity. Jung recognized that hero myths from cultures around the world share remarkably similar structures, suggesting they emerge from archetypal patterns embedded in the collective unconscious rather than mere cultural transmission. The hero's journey typically involves leaving the familiar world, facing dangerous challenges, receiving help from wise mentors, and returning home transformed with new knowledge or powers that benefit the community. This archetypal pattern provides a psychological map for the individuation process and helps individuals understand their own struggles for growth and self realization. The psychological hero's journey begins with what Jung called the call to adventure, a disruption of ordinary life that forces individuals to confront new challenges and leave behind comfortable but limiting circumstances. This call might come through external events like job loss, relationship crisis, or illness, or through internal restlessness and dissatisfaction with existing life patterns. Initially, most people resist this call and attempt to maintain their familiar routines and identities. But the pressure for growth eventually becomes too strong to ignore. The decision to answer the call requires courage because it means abandoning known securities and entering unknown territory where old coping strategies may no longer work effectively. The child archetype represents the innocent, spontaneous, and creative aspects of human nature that often become buried under adult responsibilities and social conditioning. Jung identified several manifestations of the child archetype, including the divine child, who represents new potential and spiritual rebirth, and the wounded child, who carries the pain and limitations inherited from early life experiences. The child archetype possesses remarkable resilience and the capacity for wonder play and magical thinking that adults often lose in their pursuit of rational control and social success. Reconnecting with healthy child energy becomes essential for creativity, joy, and the maintenance of hope during difficult life transitions and challenges. The hero's journey involves a crucial relationship between the heroic ego and the child archetype. The hero must learn to protect and nurture their inner child, while also developing the strength and skills necessary to face adult challenges. Many psychological problems arise when individuals either remain too identified with the child archetype and avoid adult responsibilities, or when they completely abandon their childlike qualities in favor of rigid adult personas. The successful completion of the hero's journey requires integrating both childlike wonder and adult competence, creating a mature personality that maintains access to creativity and spontaneity, while also possessing the strength to handle life's inevitable difficulties. This integration allows individuals to approach challenges with both wisdom and freshness, avoiding the cynicism that often accompanies purely adult perspectives. Jung emphasized that the hero's journey is not a one-time event, but a recurring pattern that individuals must navigate repeatedly throughout their lives. Each major life transition, from adolescence to marriage to parenthood to career changes to aging, involves leaving behind an old identity and developing new capacities for meeting changed circumstances. Understanding the archetypal nature of these transitions helps individuals recognize that their struggles are part of universal human experience rather than personal failures or unique problems. The hero's journey also provides hope during difficult periods by suggesting that current challenges serve a larger purpose in personal development and that transformation and renewal remain possible regardless of past failures or present circumstances. The trickster archetype represents one of the most ancient and psychologically significant figures in human consciousness, embodying the principle of creative chaos that disrupts established order and creates new possibilities. Found in virtually every culture, from the Norse god Loki to the Native American coyote to the African Anansi, the trickster challenges conventional wisdom and social rules through humor, cunning, and boundary-crossing behavior. Psychologically, the trickster represents the part of human nature that questions authority, exposes hypocrisy, and refuses to be contained by rigid social expectations or moral categories. This archetype serves an essential function in maintaining psychological flexibility and preventing individuals and societies from becoming too rigid or self-righteous. The magician archetype embodies the human capacity for transformation, knowledge of hidden laws, and the ability to bridge different levels of reality. The magician possesses special knowledge about how things work and can manipulate these forces to create desired changes in both inner and outer circumstances. In positive manifestation, the magician represents wisdom, healing power, and the capacity to help others transform their lives through insight and skill. However, the magician can also become corrupted into the manipulative sorcerer who uses knowledge for selfish purposes, or the inflated guru who claims powers that rightfully belong to the divine, rather than the human ego. Cultural archetypes emerge from the collective experiences of specific societies and represent the shared values, fears, and aspirations that define group identity. American culture, for example, has developed distinctive archetypal patterns around figures like the self-made man, the rebel, and the pioneer, while other cultures emphasize different archetypal configurations based on their unique historical experiences and environmental challenges. These cultural archetypes powerfully influence individual psychology, shaping personal goals, relationship expectations, and beliefs about what constitutes a meaningful and successful life. Understanding cultural archetypes helps explain why people from different backgrounds often have difficulty understanding each other's motivations and values, even when they share similar personality types. Jung observed that cultural archetypes can become problematic when they are too rigidly defined, or when they exclude important aspects of human experience. Cultures that overemphasize masculine archetypes like the warrior or king may struggle to integrate feminine values like cooperation and emotional sensitivity, while cultures that idealize maternal figures may have difficulty accepting aggressive or competitive impulses. The process of cultural evolution involves a gradual transformation of archetypal patterns as societies encounter new challenges and develop new capacities for meeting them. Individual psychological development often requires questioning inherited cultural archetypes and developing a more personal and authentic relationship with universal archetypal energies. The integration of trickster and magician energies becomes particularly important for creative individuals and those working in fields that require innovation and transformation. The trickster provides the willingness to experiment, make mistakes, and challenge conventional approaches, while the magician offers the discipline and knowledge necessary to channel creative chaos into constructive outcomes. Both archetypes can become dangerous when they operate unconsciously, lead into destructive rebellion or manipulative power games, rather than genuine transformation and growth. Conscious relationship with these archetypal energies allows individuals to serve as agents of positive change in their personal lives and communities, while avoiding the inflation and shadow possession that often accompanies identification with powerful archetypal figures. This psychology for sleep invites you to recognize these ancient patterns operating in your modern life. Jung revolutionized psychology by recognizing that human development continues throughout the entire lifespan, rather than ending with childhood or adolescence. He identified distinct psychological tasks and challenges that correspond to different life stages, each requiring specific developmental achievements and offering unique opportunities for growth and self-understanding. Unlike purely biological or social models of development, Jung's approach emphasized the psychological and spiritual dimensions of life transitions, recognizing that external changes often mask deeper internal transformations. Understanding these life stages helps individuals navigate major transitions with greater awareness and purpose, while recognizing that apparent crises often signal important developmental opportunities rather than simple problems to be solved. The first half of life, which Jung considered to extend roughly until age 40, focuses primarily on ego development and adaptation to external reality. During this period, individuals establish their identity, develop their capabilities, build relationships, and create their place in the social and professional world. The psychological tasks of this period include separating from parents, developing competence and confidence, establishing intimate relationships, and beginning to contribute to society through work and family responsibilities. Success during the first half of life typically involves developing a strong ego structure, mastering relevant skills, and achieving recognition and security in the external world. The midlife transition, which usually occurs between the late 30s and early 50s, represents a crucial turning point where the values and goals that previously provided meaning begin to feel insufficient or hollow. Jung observed that many individuals experience significant psychological disruption during this period, as they question whether their achievements have truly satisfied their deeper longings for purpose and fulfillment. This transition often involves confronting mortality, recognizing unrealized potentials, and beginning to shift focus from external achievement to internal development and meaning-making. The midlife crisis, while often painful and disorienting, serves an essential function in redirecting psychological energy toward individuation and spiritual growth. The second half of life requires fundamentally different psychological orientations and developmental tasks compared to the first half. Rather than continuing to focus on ego expansion and external achievement, individuals must learn to serve something greater than their personal desires and ambitions. This period involves developing wisdom rather than just knowledge, finding meaning in limitation and loss, and preparing for the ultimate transition of death. Jung emphasized that the second half of life has a naturally religious character, meaning that individuals begin to seek connection with transcendent values and experiences that provide perspective on the temporary nature of earthly concerns. Each life stage transition involves what Jung called a sacrifice of the previous attitude, meaning that individuals must let go of identities, goals, and strategies that served them well in earlier periods but have become obstacles to further development. Young adults must sacrifice childhood dependency and fantasy to develop adult competence and responsibility, while midlife individuals must sacrifice the illusion of unlimited possibility and eternal youth to embrace mature wisdom and acceptance. These sacrifices are rarely made willingly, which explains why life transitions often involve periods of resistance depression and apparent regression before new attitudes can emerge. Understanding the necessity of these psychological deaths and rebirths helps individuals approach life transitions with greater patience and trust in the natural development process rather than fighting against inevitable changes. The midlife crisis represents one of Jung's most important discoveries about adult psychological development and the natural progression of human consciousness. Jung observed that sometime between the late 30s and early 50s, many individuals experience a profound questioning of the values, goals, and identities that previously gave their lives meaning and direction. This crisis often manifests as depression, anxiety, relationship problems, career dissatisfaction, or a general sense that life has lost its vitality and purpose, despite external success and achievement. Rather than viewing these symptoms as pathological, Jung recognized them as signals from the unconscious that the time has come for a fundamental reorientation of psychological priorities and life direction. The midlife crisis typically emerges when individuals realize that the external achievements they pursued during the first half of life have not provided the deep satisfaction and meaning they expected. Successful professionals may suddenly feel empty despite recognition and financial security. Devoted parents may experience identity confusion when their children become independent. Committed spouses may question whether their relationships truly reflect their authentic needs and desires. These realizations often trigger a period of intense self-examination and questioning that can feel like a complete breakdown of previously stable life structures. Jung understood this breakdown as a necessary prelude to psychological reconstruction based on more authentic and mature foundations. The psychological dynamics of midlife transformation involve a fundamental shift in the relationship between ego consciousness and the unconscious. During the first half of life, the ego typically dominates psychological functioning, making decisions based on personal ambition, social expectations, and rational planning for future goals. At midlife, the unconscious begins to assert its own agenda more forcefully, often through dreams, fantasies, symptoms, and attractions that contradict conscious plans and values. This creates an internal conflict between the established ego identity and emerging unconscious contents that demand recognition and integration into conscious personality. Jung identified several common themes that characterize midlife psychological transformation. many individuals begin to question the persona they have developed for professional and social success, recognizing that their public image may have become disconnected from their authentic feelings and values. There is often a renewed interest in neglected aspects of personality, such as creative abilities that were abandoned for practical careers, or emotional sensitivities that were suppressed in favor of rational efficiency. The shadow aspects of personality may also emerge more forcefully as individuals become aware of impulses and desires they have long denied or projected onto others. The successful navigation of midlife transformation requires developing what Jung called a religious attitude, meaning a willingness to serve something greater than personal ego, desires, and ambitions. This does not necessarily involve traditional religious practice, but rather a recognition that life has deeper purposes and meanings that transcend individual achievement and gratification. Individuals must learn to listen to the wisdom of the unconscious while maintaining the ego strength necessary to function effectively in daily life. This integration process often takes several years and may involve significant changes in relationships, career direction, and lifestyle as individuals align their external circumstances with their evolving inner truth and authentic self-expression. This psychology for sleep gently holds the threshold of your own transformation. Jung's principle of the integration of opposites represents one of his most profound insights into the nature of psychological health and spiritual development. He observed that human personality naturally contains contradictory tendencies, conflicting desires, and opposing perspectives that create internal tension and apparent psychological problems. Rather than trying to eliminate these contradictions or choosing one side over another, Jung discovered that psychological growth requires learning to hold opposites in conscious tension until a new synthesis emerges that transcends the limitations of either extreme position. This process, which he called the transcendent function, creates new conscious attitudes and capabilities that would be impossible to achieve through rational analysis or willful decision-making alone. The most fundamental opposition in human psychology exists between conscious and unconscious contents of the psyche. Consciousness naturally tends toward order, control, and rational understanding, while the unconscious contains chaotic, instinctive, and irrational elements that often contradict conscious intentions and values. Many psychological problems arise when individuals try to maintain complete conscious control and refuse to acknowledge the legitimate needs and wisdom of unconscious contents. Integration requires developing the capacity to remain conscious while also remaining open to unconscious influences, creating a dynamic dialogue between rational and irrational aspects of personality, rather than allowing either to dominate completely. Other important psychological opposites include thinking versus feeling, sensation versus intuition, extraversion versus introversion, and masculine versus feminine psychological qualities. Most individuals develop a strong preference for one side of these opposites, while relegating the other side to the unconscious, creating both strengths and blind spots in their personality development. Psychological maturity involves gradually developing the less preferred functions and attitudes without abandoning the naturally dominant ones, creating a more complete and flexible personality structure. This integration process often requires confronting the fear and resistance that arise when individuals attempt to develop psychological capabilities that feel foreign or threatening to their established self-image. Jung emphasized that integration does not mean eliminating psychological tensions or achieving a static state of perfect balance. Instead, it involves developing the capacity to remain centered while experiencing the full intensity of conflicting psychological forces without being torn apart by them. This creates what Jung called a creative tension that generates new insights, solutions, and possibilities for growth and self-expression. Individuals who have achieved significant integration of opposites often display a quality of psychological resilience and wisdom that allows them to navigate complex situations without becoming overwhelmed or rigid in their responses. The integration of opposites also has important implications for understanding relationships and social conflicts. Jung observed that many interpersonal problems arise when individuals project their own internal contradictions onto others, creating external conflicts that mirror unresolved internal tensions. When people learn to hold their own opposites consciously, they become less likely to engage in destructive projection and more capable of understanding and appreciating differences in others. This psychological development contributes to greater empathy, tolerance, and the capacity for genuine dialogue across differences of opinion, personality, and cultural background. Jung's approach to dream analysis departed radically from Freudian methods and established dreams as one of the most important sources of psychological insight and guidance available to human consciousness. While Freud viewed dreams primarily as disguised wish fulfillments that revealed repressed sexual desires, Jung discovered that dreams serve a compensatory function, providing perspectives and information that balance and complement conscious attitudes. Jung treated dreams as direct communications from the unconscious that speak in their own symbolic language, rather than as coded messages that need to be translated into rational concepts. This approach requires learning to understand dream symbolism on its own terms, rather than reducing dream images to predetermined meanings or theoretical interpretations. Jung developed a method called amplification that explores dream symbols by connecting them to cultural, mythological, and archetypal parallels rather than focusing solely on personal associations. When a dream contains an image of a snake, for example, Jung would consider not only the dreamer's personal experiences with snakes, but also the universal symbolic meanings of serpents in mythology, religion, and folklore. This approach recognizes that dream symbols often carry both personal and collective meanings, connecting individual psychological development to larger patterns of human experience and wisdom. Amplification helps reveal the deeper archetypal dimensions of dreams while maintaining connection to their personal relevance for the individual dreamer. The compensatory function of dreams means they often present perspectives that contradict or balance the dreamer's conscious attitudes and beliefs. Someone who is overly rational and dismissive of emotions might dream of being overwhelmed by floods or storms, while someone who avoids responsibility might dream of being in positions of authority or leadership. Dreams frequently feature the shadow archetype through images of criminals, dark figures, or same-sex characters who embody qualities the dreamer has disowned or rejected. Rather than viewing these challenging dream contents as problems to be solved, Jung encouraged dreamers to consider what these images might be, trying to teach them about neglected aspects of their personality. Jung observed that dreams often occur in series that develop themes and images over time, creating ongoing conversations between conscious and unconscious aspects of personality. Keeping a dream journal and tracking recurring symbols, characters, and situations helps reveal these larger patterns and their connection to the dreamer's psychological development and life circumstances. Some dreams appear to be compensatory reactions to immediate life situations, while others seem to anticipate future developments or provide guidance for important decisions and life transitions. The most significant dreams often contain powerful archetypal imagery that connects personal psychological development to universal human experiences and spiritual themes. Jung emphasized that dream interpretation requires active participation from the dreamer, rather than passive acceptance of expert analysis. The dreamer must engage with dream images through active imagination, creative expression, and honest self-reflection to discover their personal meaning and significance. Dreams often resist quick intellectual understanding and require time, patience, and multiple approaches before they yield their insights and guidance. The goal of dream work is not to achieve final interpretations, but to establish an ongoing relationship with the unconscious that enriches conscious understanding and supports psychological growth and individuation throughout life. Active imagination represents Jung's most innovative therapeutic technique and his major contribution to practical methods for exploring and integrating unconscious contents. This process involves deliberately engaging with unconscious material through imagination, while maintaining enough conscious awareness to observe and interact with what emerges. Unlike passive fantasy or daydreaming, active imagination requires focused attention and genuine dialogue with autonomous psychological contents that appear to have their own intentions and perspectives. Jung developed this technique through his own personal psychological crisis, following his break with Freud when he used active imagination to explore the disturbing unconscious material that later became his famous Red Book. The practice of active imagination begins by entering a relaxed but alert state of consciousness and allowing images, figures, or scenarios to emerge spontaneously from the unconscious. Rather than directing or controlling these contents, the practitioner observes what appears and then engages with it as if encountering real autonomous beings or situations. This might involve having conversations with dream figures, exploring imaginary landscapes, or allowing dramatic scenarios to unfold while maintaining conscious participation and ethical responsibility for one's actions within the imagination. The key is to treat imaginary contents as psychologically real and meaningful, rather than dismissing them as mere fantasy or wishful thinking. Jung discovered that active imagination provides direct access to archetypal material and allows individuals to work with psychological complexes in a safe but powerful way. Troubling shadow figures from dreams can be encountered and dialogued with in active imagination, often revealing their positive intentions and transforming from threatening adversaries into helpful allies. Anima and animus figures can be met and questioned about their needs and wisdom, helping to integrate contrasexual psychological contents more consciously. Active imagination also provides a method for exploring personal complexes and understanding their origins, needs, and potential for transformation without being overwhelmed by their emotional intensity. The practice requires careful attention to ethical considerations and psychological boundaries to prevent inflation or possession by autonomous unconscious contents. Jung emphasized that practitioners must maintain their ego integrity and moral responsibility, even while engaging with powerful archetypal energies and primitive psychological material. This means refusing to act out destructive impulses that emerge in imagination and maintaining clear distinctions between imaginary and external reality. Active imagination should enhance rather than replace engagement with the outer world, providing insights and energy that improve real life relationships and responsibilities rather than creating escape from them. Jung found that active imagination often produces surprisingly creative and therapeutic results that cannot be achieved through purely rational approaches to psychological problems. Complex psychological conflicts may resolve spontaneously when allowed to play out in imagination, and creative solutions to practical problems often emerge from dialogue with unconscious figures. The technique also provides a way to continue psychological development throughout life by maintaining ongoing communication with the deeper layers of personality that contain wisdom and guidance beyond conscious understanding. Many individuals find that regular practice of active imagination enhances their creativity, emotional resilience, and capacity for self understanding, while providing a reliable method for accessing inner guidance during difficult life transitions and important decisions. Through this psychology for sleep, your unconscious begins its own work. Jung's word association experiments revolutionized the understanding of unconscious psychological processes and provided the first scientific evidence for the existence of autonomous psychological complexes. In these experiments, Jung would read a list of words to patients and measure their response time and emotional reactions to each word, noting delays, unusual responses, and signs of emotional disturbance. Certain words consistently triggered delayed responses, memory lapses, and physiological changes that revealed the presence of emotionally charged psychological material operating outside conscious control. These experiments demonstrated that the unconscious contains organized psychological structures that can interfere with conscious functioning, and provided objective evidence for psychoanalytic theories about repressed psychological content. Jung developed several other innovative therapeutic techniques that focused on understanding the symbolic and creative expressions of the unconscious, rather than relying solely on verbal analysis and interpretation. He encouraged patients to express their psychological experiences through art movement, sand play, and other creative modalities that bypass rational defenses and allow unconscious contents to emerge more directly. Jung observed that many psychological insights cannot be adequately expressed in words alone and require symbolic or artistic expression to capture their full meaning and emotional significance. These creative approaches often reveal psychological dynamics and solutions that remain hidden when therapy focuses exclusively on verbal discussion and rational understanding. The technique of amplification became a cornerstone of Jungian therapy, involving the exploration of personal psychological material through connections to cultural, mythological, and archetypal parallels. When a patient reports a significant dream symptom or life experience, the therapist helps amplify its meaning by drawing on knowledge of similar patterns in mythology, folklore, and religious traditions from around the world. This approach helps patients understand their personal struggles as part of larger human experiences rather than isolated individual problems, often providing hope and perspective during difficult psychological passages. Amplification also reveals the archetypal dimensions of personal experience and helps connect individual psychological development to collective human wisdom and meaning. Jung pioneered the use of psychological typology as a therapeutic tool for understanding personality differences and reducing interpersonal conflicts. By helping patients understand their natural psychological preferences and the blind spots created by undeveloped functions, therapy can focus on developing greater psychological balance and flexibility. Understanding type differences also helps improve communication in relationships. By recognizing that people naturally process information and make decisions in fundamentally different ways that are not necessarily wrong or pathological, this approach shifts the focus from trying to change personality to developing greater self-acceptance and more effective strategies for using natural psychological gifts while compensating for inherent limitations. Perhaps Jung's most important therapeutic insight involved recognizing the healing potential of the therapeutic relationship itself, which he understood as a mutual transformation process affecting both patient and therapist. Jung emphasized that therapists must remain open to being changed by their encounters with patients and must be willing to engage authentically rather than hiding behind professional personas or theoretical systems. This approach requires therapists to maintain ongoing attention to their own psychological development and to recognize their own complexes and projections that may interfere with therapeutic effectiveness. Jung viewed therapy as a collaborative exploration of psychological truth rather than an expert treatment of pathological conditions, emphasizing the importance of genuine human connection in facilitating psychological healing and growth. Synchronicity represents Jung's most controversial and mysterious discovery about the nature of meaningful coincidence and the hidden connections that link psychological and physical events. Jung defined synchronicity as the meaningful coincidence of inner psychological states with outer events that cannot be explained through normal cause and effect relationships. These experiences often occur during times of psychological transition or crisis, when individuals are grappling with important life decisions or undergoing significant internal transformation. Jung believed that synchronistic events suggest the existence of an underlying order and intelligence in the universe that connects mind and matter in ways that transcend our ordinary understanding of how reality operates. Jung's interest in synchronicity began with his observation that patients often reported meaningful coincidences during therapy that seemed to reflect or illuminate their psychological development. A patient struggling with trust issues might repeatedly encounter strangers who share intimate personal stories, or someone working on accepting their shadow might notice an unusual number of references to dark or criminal themes in their environment. These coincidences often carry symbolic meaning that relates directly to the individual's psychological situation, as if the external world were responding to and reflecting internal psychological processes. Jung initially dismissed these experiences as mere chance, but gradually recognized them as a distinct psychological and perhaps physical phenomenon worthy of serious investigation. The concept of synchronicity challenges the Western scientific worldview that assumes all events must be connected through mechanical cause and effect relationships. Jung proposed that synchronistic events reflect what he called an acausal connecting principle that links events through meaning rather than physical causation. This principle operates similarly to the archetypal patterns in the collective unconscious, creating meaningful connections that transcend the boundaries between inner psychological experience and outer physical reality. Jung suggested that consciousness and matter might be two aspects of a more fundamental reality that occasionally reveals itself through synchronistic experiences that unite subjective and objective dimensions of existence. Jung observed that synchronistic experiences often cluster around times when individuals are most open to unconscious contents and archetypal influences. People undergoing psychological analysis, creative artists working on important projects, and individuals facing major life transitions frequently report increased synchronistic occurrences that seem to provide guidance, confirmation, or warning about their current life direction. These experiences can feel like communications from a deeper intelligence that knows more about an individual's life path than their conscious ego can understand. Jung emphasized that synchronicity cannot be deliberately produced or controlled, but emerges spontaneously when conditions are right for meaningful connections between inner and outer experience. The practical significance of synchronicity lies not in its potential for prediction or control, but in its capacity to provide meaning and guidance during times of uncertainty and transition. When individuals learn to recognize and respect synchronistic experiences, they often develop a greater sense of connection to larger patterns of meaning and purpose that transcend their personal concerns and struggles. This can provide comfort during difficult periods and support for trusting the unfolding process of life, even when rational analysis cannot provide clear answers or direction. Jung viewed attention to synchronicity as one aspect of developing what he called a religious attitude toward life that recognizes the presence of mystery and meaning beyond rational understanding and personal control. This psychology for sleep opens you to patterns beyond causation. Jung's extensive study of medieval alchemy provided him with a symbolic language for understanding psychological transformation and the individuation process that could not be adequately expressed through conventional psychological concepts. After years of struggling to communicate his insights about psychological development, Jung discovered that the alchemical texts contained detailed descriptions of the same transformation processes he observed in his patients and in his own psychological development. The alchemist's quest to transform base metals into gold served as a metaphor for the psychological transformation of unconscious contents into conscious awareness, and the development of the integrated personality Jung called the self. This discovery provided Jung with a historical and symbolic framework that validated his psychological theories and offered practical guidance for understanding the stages and challenges of psychological development. Alchemical symbolism describes psychological transformation as a series of operations that involve the dissolution, purification, and reconstitution of psychological contents. The initial stage, called the nigredo, or blackening, corresponds to the confrontation with shadow material and the breakdown of existing psychological structures that have become inadequate or restrictive. This phase often involves depression, confusion, and the disintegration of previously stable identity structures. But Jung recognized it as a necessary prelude to psychological renewal. The albedo, or whitening stage, represents the emergence of new clarity and the integration of purified psychological contents, while the rubedo, or reddening, symbolizes the final achievement of psychological wholeness and the realization of the self. Jung found that alchemical texts provided detailed guidance for working with the psychological conflicts and paradoxes that characterize the individuation process. The alchemical principle of the union of opposites, symbolized by the marriage of the king and queen, or the hermaphrodite, corresponds to the psychological integration of masculine and feminine, conscious and unconscious spiritual and material aspects of personality. The alchemical emphasis on patient observation and gradual transformation offered an alternative to quick psychological fixes and supported Jung's belief that genuine psychological development requires time, attention, and respect for natural psychological processes. The mysterious nature of alchemical operations also validated Jung's observation that psychological transformation often involves elements that cannot be fully understood or controlled through rational analysis alone. The study of alchemy helped Jung understand that psychological development has always been a central human concern, even when disguised in seemingly non-psychological language and imagery. The alchemist's laboratory work served as an external focus for inner psychological processes, allowing them to project and work with unconscious contents through their chemical experiments and symbolic interpretations. Jung recognized that many religious, mystical, and esoteric traditions contain similar symbolic descriptions of psychological transformation, processes suggesting that the individuation journey represents a universal human experience rather than a modern psychological theory. This historical perspective provided Jung with confidence that his psychological insights reflected fundamental truths about human nature rather than merely personal or cultural peculiarities. Jung's alchemical studies also revealed the importance of what he called the participation mystique between the observer and the observed in psychological transformation work. The alchemists believed that their own psychological state influenced the success of their operations, recognizing that transformation requires the active participation of the entire personality rather than detached intellectual analysis. This insight supported Jung's emphasis on the therapeutic relationship as a mutual transformation process, and his belief that psychological understanding requires personal engagement rather than objective scientific observation. The alchemical tradition offered Jung a model for psychological work that honors both the scientific desire for understanding and the mystical recognition that some aspects of transformation transcend rational comprehension and control. Jung's relationship with religion and spirituality represented one of the most complex and controversial aspects of his psychological theories and personal development. Raised in a family of pastors, but deeply troubled by conventional Christian doctrine. From an early age, Jung spent his entire career attempting to understand religious experience from a psychological perspective, without reducing it to mere pathology or wishful thinking. He distinguished between religion as organized institutional practice and religiosity as a fundamental psychological attitude that seeks connection with transcendent meaning and value. Jung believed that religious experience represents a natural and necessary aspect of psychological development rather than a primitive or neurotic response to life's difficulties and uncertainties. Jung observed that many of his patients suffered from what he called a spiritual problem, meaning their psychological difficulties stemmed from a lack of meaning and connection to values greater than personal ego concerns. He noticed that individuals who experienced genuine religious or spiritual transformation often showed remarkable psychological healing and development that could not be explained through conventional therapeutic methods alone. These observations led Jung to conclude that the human psyche naturally seeks relationship with what he termed the numinous, those experiences of the sacred that evoke awe, reverence, and a sense of connection to ultimate reality. Jung argued that suppressing or dismissing these spiritual needs creates psychological imbalance and contributes to many forms of mental and emotional suffering. The concept of the self-archetype provided Jung with a psychological framework for understanding religious experience without reducing it to mere projection or delusion. Jung observed that the symbols and experiences associated with self-realization often possess the same qualities that characterize religious experience, including feelings of unity, transcendence, and connection to absolute value and meaning. He suggested that authentic religious experience involves an encounter with the self-archetype, which represents the divine image within human personality, rather than a projection onto external deities or institutions. This perspective allows for the validation of religious experience while maintaining a psychological, rather than metaphysical understanding of its nature and significance. Jung's approach to spirituality emphasized direct personal experience rather than adherence to established doctrines or institutional authorities. He encouraged individuals to develop their own relationship with the sacred through attention to dreams, synchronicities, and the symbolic communications of the unconscious, rather than relying solely on traditional religious teachings or practices. Jung believed that genuine spiritual development requires the same kind of psychological honesty and self-confrontation involved in any authentic individuation process, including the integration of shadow material and the recognition of personal limitations and contradictions. This approach often conflicts with conventional religious expectations that emphasize moral purity and idealistic self-improvement, rather than the acceptance of human complexity and ambiguity. Jung's emphasis on the psychological reality of religious experience had profound implications for understanding both mental health and spiritual development. He argued that psychological problems often reflect spiritual crises, and that effective therapy must address the meaning making and value seeking aspects of human nature rather than focusing solely on symptom reduction or behavioral change. Similarly, Jung warned that spiritual practices that ignore psychological reality often lead to inflation, projection, and other forms of unconscious possession, rather than genuine transcendence and wisdom. His integration of psychological and spiritual perspectives offered a path toward wholeness that honors both the scientific understanding of human nature and the legitimate human need for connection with transcendent meaning and purpose. Jung's study of mythology and fairy tales provided crucial evidence for his theory of the collective unconscious and revealed the universal psychological patterns that underlie human experience across all cultures and historical periods. He discovered that the same basic stories, symbols, and character types appear repeatedly in the folklore of societies that have had no historical contact with each other, suggesting these patterns emerge from shared psychological structures rather than cultural transmission. These archetypal stories serve as maps for understanding fundamental human experiences, like growing up, falling in love, facing challenges, and discovering personal identity and purpose. Jung viewed mythology and fairy tales as the collective dreams of humanity that preserve and transmit essential psychological wisdom from generation to generation. Fairy tales particularly fascinated Jung because they present archetypal patterns in their simplest and most direct form, stripped of the elaborate cultural and historical details that characterize more complex mythological systems. The basic structure of fairy tales typically involves a young person leaving home facing various trials and challenges, receiving help from magical figures, and ultimately achieving transformation and integration. This pattern mirrors the individuation process and provides guidance for understanding the psychological tasks and obstacles involved in personal development and self-realization. Jung observed that the symbolic language of fairy tales speaks directly to the unconscious and often provides insights about psychological problems that cannot be accessed through rational analysis alone. The study of collective symbols revealed how archetypal images carry multiple layers of meaning that can be understood at personal, cultural, and universal levels simultaneously. The symbol of the tree, for example, might represent personal growth for an individual, cultural values about connection to nature for a society, and the archetypal pattern of the axis mundi that connects earth and heaven for humanity as a whole. Jung discovered that authentic symbols cannot be artificially created or manipulated, but emerge spontaneously from the unconscious when conditions are right for their appearance. These natural symbols possess what Jung called a transcendent function that bridges conscious and unconscious contents and facilitates psychological transformation and growth. Jung found that modern individuals often suffer from symbol poverty, meaning they have lost connection to the rich symbolic traditions that previously provided meaning and guidance for psychological development. The rationalistic and materialistic orientation of contemporary culture tends to dismiss symbolic thinking as primitive or superstitious, leaving people without adequate resources for understanding their inner experiences and life transitions. This symbolic impoverishment contributes to feelings of meaninglessness and disconnection that characterize many modern psychological problems and spiritual crises. Jung encouraged individuals to reconnect with mythological and fairy tale wisdom, while also remaining open to the emergence of new symbols that might be more appropriate for contemporary psychological needs and challenges. The practical application of mythological and fairy tale wisdom involves learning to recognize archetypal patterns in personal experience and using these patterns as guides for understanding current psychological situations and future development possibilities. Someone struggling with a difficult relationship might find guidance in stories about the integration of beauty and beast, while a person facing career challenges might benefit from hero journey narratives about overcoming obstacles and discovering hidden abilities. Jung emphasized that these stories should not be interpreted literally, but understood as symbolic maps that provide perspective and encouragement for navigating the universal human experiences of growth, challenge, and transformation. This approach helps individuals recognize that their personal struggles are part of larger patterns of human experience, and that wisdom for addressing these challenges has been preserved in the collective stories and symbols of humanity. This psychology for sleep reconnects you with ancient wisdom. Jung's exploration of art and creativity revealed their crucial role in psychological development and the expression of unconscious contents that cannot be adequately communicated through rational language alone. He observed that creative expression often emerges from the same psychological depths that produce dreams and symptoms, but transforms potentially disturbing unconscious material into forms that can be consciously appreciated and integrated. Jung distinguished between two types of creative work: psychological art that focuses on personal experience and meaning, and visionary art that channels archetypal contents from the collective unconscious and speaks to universal human experiences. Both forms serve important psychological functions, but visionary art particularly fascinated Jung because of its capacity to reveal collective psychological dynamics and anticipate cultural developments. The mandala symbol became central to Jung's understanding of psychological wholeness and the self-archetype. Jung first encountered mandalas in his own psychological work when he began spontaneously drawing circular patterns during his personal crisis following his break with Freud. He discovered that creating these circular designs provided a sense of psychological centering and helped integrate conflicting psychological contents into a unified whole. Jung later found that mandala symbols appear universally in religious art, cultural traditions, and the spontaneous artistic expressions of individuals undergoing psychological transformation, suggesting they represent an archetypal pattern for organizing psychological experience around a stable center. Jung observed that mandalas naturally emerge in the artwork of individuals who are working to integrate opposing psychological forces and achieve greater personality wholeness. The circular boundary of the mandala provides a contained space where conflicting elements can be arranged in harmonious relationship without destroying each other through unresolved tension. The center of the mandala often contains symbols that represent the self or divine presence, while the surrounding areas display various psychological contents in balanced relationship to this organizing principle. Creating mandalas can serve as both a diagnostic tool for understanding current psychological states and a therapeutic technique for promoting integration and psychological healing. The process of artistic creation itself serves important psychological functions that extend beyond the production of aesthetic objects or personal entertainment. Jung discovered that genuine creative work requires the ego to step aside and allow unconscious contents to emerge and find expression through the creative medium. This process of creative surrender and conscious collaboration with unconscious forces provides practice for the kind of ego self relationship that characterizes psychological maturity and wisdom. Creative work also provides a safe way to explore and express psychological contents that might be too threatening or overwhelming to encounter directly through other means, allowing gradual integration of shadow material and archetypal energies. Jung emphasized that the psychological value of artistic expression does not depend on technical skill or aesthetic sophistication, but on the authenticity and depth of the psychological contents being expressed. Simple drawings, poems, or other creative expressions that emerge spontaneously from psychological need often possess more therapeutic value than technically accomplished works that remain disconnected from genuine inner experience. Jung encouraged individuals to engage in regular creative practice as part of their psychological development, viewing artistic expression as a natural human capacity that provides access to wisdom and healing resources that exist beyond the rational understanding. This approach treats creativity not as a special talent possessed by a few gifted individuals, but as a fundamental psychological function that can support growth and integration throughout life for anyone willing to engage authentically with their inner creative impulses. Jung's approach to understanding mental illness departed significantly from traditional medical models by viewing psychological symptoms as meaningful expressions of unconscious conflicts rather than simply biological dysfunctions to be eliminated. He observed that neurotic symptoms often serve a compensatory function, attempted to restore psychological balance when conscious attitudes have become too one-sided or when important psychological needs have been ignored or suppressed. Rather than viewing symptoms as purely pathological, Jung recognized them as communications from the unconscious that signal the need for psychological adjustment and growth. This perspective shifts the focus from symptom elimination to understanding the psychological meaning and purpose behind disturbing mental and emotional experiences. Jung distinguished between neurosis and psychosis based on the individual's relationship to unconscious contents and their capacity to maintain ego functioning. In neurosis, the ego remains relatively intact, but conflicts with unconscious contents create anxiety, depression, obsessions, or other symptoms that interfere with daily functioning. The neurotic individual typically maintains awareness of reality, but experiences internal conflicts between conscious intentions and unconscious impulses, or between different psychological complexes. Jung viewed neurosis as a sign that the personality has become unbalanced and needs to integrate neglected or rejected aspects of psychological experience in order to achieve greater wholeness and authentic self expression. Psychosis, in Jung's understanding, involves a more serious breakdown in the relationship between ego consciousness and unconscious contents, often resulting in the flooding of consciousness by archetypal material that cannot be adequately integrated or understood. Rather than viewing psychotic experiences as meaningless brain disorders, Jung looked for the psychological significance and symbolic meaning contained within apparently bizarre thoughts, perceptions, and behaviors. He observed that psychotic episodes often contain profound spiritual and archetypal themes that reflect the individual's attempt to resolve fundamental questions about identity, meaning, and relationship to ultimate reality. This approach suggests that some forms of mental breakdown might represent incomplete or misdirected attempts at psychological breakthrough and transformation. Jung's concept of mental health emphasized psychological wholeness and the capacity for ongoing growth and adaptation, rather than the mere absence of symptoms or perfect social adjustment. He believed that psychological health requires maintaining a dynamic relationship between conscious and unconscious contents that allows for the integration of new experiences and the continued development of personality throughout life. This includes the ability to access and express the full range of human psychological capacities, including thinking, feeling, sensation, intuition, and the various archetypal energies that provide vitality and meaning. Jung warned that excessive psychological one-sidedness, even in socially approved directions, creates the conditions for eventual psychological breakdown and symptom formation. The therapeutic implications of Jung's approach emphasize supporting the individual's natural healing processes rather than imposing external solutions or attempting to eliminate all psychological discomfort. Jung believed that psychological symptoms often contain the seeds of their own resolution, and that the goal of therapy should be to help individuals understand and work with their symptoms, rather than simply fighting against them. This approach requires patience and trust in the wisdom of psychological processes that may initially appear destructive or meaningless, but often reveal their constructive purpose when approached with respect and careful attention. Jung's perspective offers hope for individuals struggling with mental health challenges by suggesting that psychological difficulties often represent attempts at growth and self-healing that can be supported and facilitated through understanding and appropriate psychological work. Jung's understanding of projection revealed one of the most fundamental mechanisms by which unconscious contents influence conscious experience and interpersonal relationships. Projection occurs when individuals unconsciously attribute their own psychological qualities, conflicts, or potentials to other people, seeing in others what they cannot recognize or accept within themselves. This process operates automatically and largely outside conscious awareness, creating distorted perceptions of other people that reflect the projector's internal psychological state, rather than the actual characteristics of the person being perceived. Jung observed that projection serves both defensive and developmental functions, protecting the ego from threatening self-knowledge. while also providing opportunities for psychological growth through the eventual recognition and withdrawal of projections. The mechanism of projection operates most powerfully when individuals encounter others who carry some genuine resemblance to the projected content, creating what Jung called a hook for the projection to attach itself. Someone who has repressed their aggressive impulses might become intensely reactive to relatively minor displays of assertiveness in others, while someone who has disowned their creative potential might feel either envious or dismissive toward artistic individuals. These projections often feel completely justified and rational to the person making it extremely difficult to recognize when projection is occurring rather than accurate perception. The emotional intensity surrounding certain relationships and reactions often provides the best clue that projection may be involved, as the strength of feeling usually exceeds what the actual situation warrants. Transference represents a specific form of projection that occurs within therapeutic relationships and other situations involving authority, intimacy, or dependency. Jung observed that patients inevitably project archetypal images onto their therapists, seeing them as parental figures, wise guides, or even divine healers who possess special powers to provide salvation or transformation. These transference projections often recreate early relationship patterns and unresolved conflicts from childhood, providing opportunities to work through psychological wounds and develop more mature relationship capacities. Jung emphasized that transference is a natural and necessary part of psychological healing that should be understood and worked with rather than avoided or quickly dissolved through interpretation alone. Countertransference. Jung's term for the therapist's emotional reactions to patients represents an equally important but often overlooked aspect of relationship dynamics in therapy and other intimate connections. Jung recognized that therapists inevitably have their own psychological reactions to patients that can provide valuable information about unconscious dynamics operating within the therapeutic relationship. Rather than viewing countertransference as a problem to be eliminated, Jung saw it as a source of insight that could enhance therapeutic understanding when approached with conscious awareness and appropriate boundaries. This perspective revolutionized therapeutic practice by acknowledging that healing relationships involve mutual psychological influence rather than one-way expert treatment of passive recipients. The recognition and withdrawal of projections represents one of the most important tasks of psychological development and healthy relationship functioning. This process requires developing the capacity to distinguish between one's own psychological contents and the actual characteristics of other people, taking responsibility for disowned aspects of personality rather than trying to change or control others. Jung observed that successful projection withdrawal often involves a period of disillusionment, as idealized or demonized others are seen more realistically, followed by the challenging work of integrating previously projected contents into conscious personality. This process ultimately leads to more authentic relationships based on genuine appreciation for others as they actually are, rather than as carriers of unconscious psychological projections, while also promoting psychological growth through the integration of previously unconscious personality aspects. Jung's encounter with Eastern philosophical and spiritual traditions profoundly influenced his understanding of consciousness, psychological development, and the ultimate goals of human existence. Beginning in the 1920s, Jung studied Hindu, Buddhist, Taoist, and other Eastern texts, finding remarkable parallels between Eastern descriptions of consciousness, transformation, and his own observations about individuation and psychological wholeness. Unlike many Western intellectuals who approached Eastern philosophy as exotic curiosities, Jung recognized these traditions as sophisticated psychological systems that offered practical guidance for understanding and working with the deeper layers of human consciousness. This cross cultural perspective validated Jung's psychological theories while also expanding his understanding of human potential and the possibilities for consciousness development. The Hindu concept of the self as the ultimate reality underlying individual consciousness provided Jung with a framework for understanding his own discovery of the self archetype. Jung found striking similarities between his clinical observations about self realization and the Hindu descriptions of discovering one's true nature beyond the ego identity. Both traditions emphasize that genuine psychological maturity requires recognizing the illusory nature of the separate ego and developing identification with a deeper, more universal aspect of consciousness. However, Jung maintained that his psychological approach differed from traditional Hindu philosophy by focusing on the integration of unconscious contents rather than transcending or escaping from psychological experience entirely. Buddhist teachings about the nature of suffering attachment and the possibility of liberation resonated deeply with Jung's understanding of neurosis and psychological healing. The Buddhist analysis of how mental suffering arises from clinging to fixed ideas about self and reality paralleled Jung's observations about how psychological rigidity creates internal conflicts and symptoms. The Buddhist emphasis on mindful awareness and non judgmental observation of mental processes influenced Jung's therapeutic techniques and his approach to working with unconscious contents. Jung particularly appreciated the Buddhist middle way philosophy that avoids extreme positions and seeks balance between opposing forces, seeing it as compatible with his own emphasis on integrating psychological opposites rather than eliminating them. Taoist philosophy provided Jung with valuable insights about the natural flow of psychological energy and the importance of Wu Wei, or effortless action, that aligns with natural processes rather than forcing outcomes through willful control. The Taoist concept of yin and yang as complementary opposites that create dynamic balance influenced Jung's understanding of how psychological transformation occurs through the integration of opposing forces rather than the victory of one side over another. Jung found the Taoist emphasis on following natural rhythms and cycles particularly relevant for understanding psychological development and the timing of therapeutic interventions. The Taoist ideal of the sage who has achieved harmony with the natural order provided Jung with a model for psychological maturity that emphasized wisdom and spontaneous responsiveness rather than rigid control or perfectionist achievement. Despite his deep appreciation for Eastern wisdom traditions, Jung maintained that Western individuals needed to find their own authentic path to psychological wholeness rather than simply adopting Eastern practices without understanding their cultural context. He warned against what he called a psychic inflation that could result from premature identification with Eastern spiritual ideals without adequate psychological preparation and integration. Jung emphasized that genuine psychological transformation requires honest confrontation with one's own cultural conditioning and personal shadow, rather than escape into exotic spiritual practices that might provide temporary relief, but failed to address fundamental psychological conflicts. His integration of Eastern and Western perspectives created a unique approach to psychological development that honored both scientific understanding and contemplative wisdom while remaining grounded in practical therapeutic work and personal psychological experience. Jung's insights into individual psychology naturally extended to understanding group dynamics, cultural phenomena, and the psychological forces that shape collective human behavior. He observed that the same archetypal patterns that influence individual development also operate at cultural and social levels, creating shared myths, values, and behavioral patterns that define group identity and guide collective action. Jung recognized that cultures, like individuals, possess both conscious values and collective shadows, and that understanding these group psychological dynamics becomes essential for comprehending social conflicts, political movements, and cultural changes. His analysis of collective psychology provided a framework for understanding how individual psychological health interconnects with the psychological health of the broader social and cultural environment. The concept of collective shadow helps explain many forms of social prejudice, scapegoating, and intergroup conflict that characterize human societies throughout history. Just as individuals project their personal shadow onto others' groups, unconsciously project their collective shadow onto other ethnicities, religions, political movements, or nations that become carriers of disowned collective qualities. This projection process allows groups to maintain idealized self-images while attributing all negative qualities to external enemies or inferior others. Jung observed that these collective projections often intensify during times of social stress or uncertainty, when groups seek simple explanations for complex problems and clear targets for their fears and frustrations. Jung's analysis of mass movements and political phenomena revealed how archetypal energies can be activated and manipulated at the collective level. He observed that successful political leaders often embody or activate powerful archetypal images, such as the wise father, the savior hero, or the strong protector, that resonate with unconscious collective needs and fantasies. When entire populations become possessed by archetypal energies without conscious understanding, they may engage in destructive collective behaviors that individual members would never consider in their personal lives. Jung's analysis of the rise of Nazism in Germany provided a chilling example of how collective psychological regression can occur when rational consciousness is overwhelmed by primitive archetypal forces that promise simple solutions to complex social and economic problems. The phenomenon of participation mystique operates powerfully in group settings, creating unconscious psychological merging that can either enhance collective creativity and cooperation, or lead to dangerous loss of individual judgment and moral responsibility. Jung observed that individuals often lose their capacity for independent thinking when they become too identified with group consciousness, allowing collective emotions and opinions to override personal values and rational analysis. This psychological fusion can create the intense solidarity and shared purpose that characterizes effective teams and communities. But it can also facilitate mob behavior and collective violence when group consciousness becomes dominated by shadow projections and archetypal possession. Understanding participation mystique helps explain both the positive potential and the dangerous risks inherent in all forms of collective human endeavor. Jung emphasized that healthy cultural development requires the same kind of consciousness and integration that characterizes individual psychological maturity. Cultures need to recognize and integrate their collective shadows rather than projecting them onto other groups. And they must develop the capacity to hold paradox and complexity rather than seeking oversimplified solutions to social problems. This requires individuals who have achieved sufficient psychological development to resist collective possession and maintain independent judgment while still contributing constructively to group goals and social cooperation. Jung viewed the development of conscious individuals as essential for cultural progress, since only people who have integrated their own shadows and developed authentic selfhood can help groups navigate the psychological challenges inherent in collective human life without succumbing to destructive archetypal possession or shadow projection. This psychology for sleep reminds you that personal healing serves collective transformation. Jung's personal psychological crisis and his creation of the Red Book between 1913 and 1930 represents one of the most extraordinary examples of self-analysis and inner exploration in psychological history. Following his dramatic break with Freud, Jung entered a period of intense psychological turmoil that he later called his confrontation with the unconscious. Rather than seek its external help or retreating from his psychological distress, Jung decided to deliberately enter into dialogue with his unconscious contents through a process he would later formalize as active imagination. This dangerous but necessary journey into his own psychological depths provided the experiential foundation for virtually all of his subsequent theoretical contributions to psychology and the understanding of human consciousness. The Red Book, which Jung originally titled Liber Novus, or New Book, chronicles Jung's encounters with various autonomous figures from his unconscious, including Philemon, Salome Alaya, and other mysterious personalities who seem to possess independent existence and wisdom. Jung engaged in extended conversations with these inner figures, asking them questions about the nature of reality consciousness and human purpose, while carefully recording their responses and insights. These dialogues often challenged Jung's rational beliefs and forced him to confront aspects of human experience that could not be understood through scientific materialism alone. The inner figures served as teachers and guides who helped Jung navigate the treacherous terrain of the unconscious, while maintaining enough ego stability to survive the process and integrate his discoveries. Jung's method involved entering a state of relaxed concentration and allowing images and scenarios to emerge spontaneously from his unconscious, then engaging with these contents as if they were real autonomous beings with their own intentions and perspectives. He would often begin by asking direct questions of his inner figures and waiting for responses that frequently surprised him with their wisdom and insight. Jung discovered that these inner personalities possessed the knowledge and perspectives that his conscious mind could not have generated through ordinary thinking, suggesting they represented genuine autonomous psychological functions rather than mere fantasy or imagination. The process required tremendous courage because Jung never knew what disturbing or challenging material might emerge from his unconscious explorations. The Red Book contains not only Jung's written dialogues with unconscious figures, but also his artistic representations of the visions and experiences he encountered during this period. Jung created elaborate illuminated manuscripts with intricate drawings, paintings, and calligraphy that attempted to capture the visual and symbolic dimensions of his inner experiences. These artistic expressions serve both as records of his psychological journey and as active imagination techniques that helped him engage more deeply with the symbolic contents of his unconscious. The combination of written dialogue and artistic expression created a complete documentation of Jung's individuation process that later provided him with source material for developing his theories about archetypes, psychological types, and the structure of the unconscious. Jung kept the Red Book secret for most of his life, sharing its contents only with a few close associates, and never publishing it during his lifetime. He feared that revealing the full extent of his psychological explorations might damage his scientific credibility and prevent others from taking his psychological theories seriously. The Red Book was finally published in 2009, nearly 50 years after Jung's death, allowing the world to see the experiential foundation underlying his analytical psychology. This remarkable document demonstrates that Jung's psychological insights emerged not from purely intellectual speculation, but from direct encounter with the deepest layers of human consciousness, providing compelling evidence for the reality of the unconscious and the possibility of conscious dialogue with autonomous psychological contents. As we move through the remaining pillars of Jungian thought, from UFOs as psychological phenomena to the Senex and pure archetypes, from psychoid dimensions to the symbolic life, and finally to the practical applications in relationships and teams, we find ourselves returning full circle to where we began, standing at the threshold between conscious and unconscious, waking and sleeping, knowledge and mystery. Jung's legacy continues to influence modern psychology, organizational development, and our understanding of what it means to become fully human. His work reminds us that personal transformation serves collective healing, that integrating our shadows makes us more whole, and that the journey of individuation is both profoundly lonely and universally shared. And so we return to that edge, the threshold between sleep and waking darkness and dawn. The mist still clings to the water. The world still holds its breath. But you are different now. You've walked through the architecture of the psyche, encountered ancient patterns living through you, seen scientific validation of the soul's wisdom, and been challenged to do the deep work yourself. Throughout this exploration of psychology for sleep, we've journeyed through Jung's complete vision, from the unconscious depths to archetypal heights, from developmental stages to creative transformation, from personal complexes to collective healing. the path ahead remains shrouded, and that perhaps is exactly as it should be. Jung never promised easy answers or quick fixes. He offered something far more valuable, a map for the lifelong journey toward wholeness. He showed us that our symptoms carry meaning, our dreams offer guidance, our shadows hold power, and our struggles participate in patterns older than civilization itself. The individuation process calls you not to perfection, but to authenticity. Not to eliminating difficulty, but to finding meaning within it. Not to transcending your humanity, but to becoming more fully human. This is slow work, invisible work that rarely receives external recognition. Yet, it is the most important work you can do for yourself and for the world. As you drift now towards sleep, allow these ideas to settle into your unconscious, like seeds planted in fertile soil. You need not remember everything consciously. The psyche has its own wisdom about what to integrate and when. Trust the process. Trust the darkness. Trust the journey. May you find your version of that dawn-lit shore not as destination, but as perpetual beginning. May you develop the courage to face your shadow, the patience to dialogue with your unconscious, and the wisdom to serve something greater than ego's small concerns. May you discover that psychology for sleep is also psychology for awakening. The forest breathes around you. The owl has fallen silent. A new day approaches, though you will not see it arrive. Rest now. The unconscious will continue its work while you sleep. And when you wake, you will carry with you, perhaps without knowing why, a deeper sense of who you truly are and who you might yet become. The journey continues. Always rest well.